Hi, this is Amir Ali Alibhai from the Aga Khan Museum, and welcome to our first episode of With the Aga Khan Museum on Ismaili TV. And in this episode, we look back at 2020. It was quite an amazing year, lots of challenges, lots of changes. We moved a lot of our programming online, and one of the things that we did is I asked all the staff, pick some of your favorite events that happened online, and let's look at the list. So we selected a few of those items. We couldn't show everything. I hope you enjoy the show. We start off with a performance from our Lapis benefit that happened in September. We filmed inside the Sanctuary exhibition. Please enjoy Chris Dirksen and Mo Clark.
Tansei, I'm Mo.
And I'm Chris.
And we're going to perform the song Refuge in Truth. And it was really inspired by the exhibit Sanctuary that I had the chance to visit for the first time yesterday. And really inspired by Nicholas Gallanin's work, as well as Marcos Ramirez Ere and Ai Weiwei. So it's looking at notions of displacement and of alienation and of being exiled from lands. As Indigenous people, this is an ongoing struggle that we face, and it's trying to piece together ways that memory can help us to reclaim that space of belonging and connection. So the lyrics in Cree, Nehiawewin, which is one of, I guess, our ancestral languages, E aspi moyak tapwe wenota mamawe pimati siwenochi. We're taking refuge in truth all together in life.
And we wrote this song inspired by this exhibit just for you today.
Inside me, there is truth, tapwewin, taking refuge. Inside me, there are circles, taking refuge. Inside me, there is shame, love, fear, taking refuge. Inside me, heartbeats built of blue spruce, tree rings rooted in legacies held deep beneath the broken, taking refuge. Inside me, your eyes forming hoops of light, resilient, courageous, walking the edge of incredible dreams, bearing witness to exiled land, poisoned streams, taking refuge. Inside me, melodic utterances of kukum song, seeping through cracks of kitchen table, ceremony held under draped sheets, woolen blankets insulate secrets, becoming prayers. Inside us, estranged moments, not all our own. An inheritance fills the silence after the bomb goes off. In our hearts, on our radios, in our streets. Deafening voices we know but do not hear unless we care to take refuge. Inside me, your eyes look darker. From this screen, this space I see. To taste you, here near me, longing pulls sense from holy pockets. Your hand wrapped in mine, memories take refuge in touch, in sweet, inside. Honey from fireweed, the beekeeper gathers at dawn. Morning dew still wet on the stem, hem of coat closing in on the hum. Can we hold close the possibility of community woven, singing the silken threads of belonging into a luminous weave, like bees, take refuge in the gift. take refuge in dirt, make our feet wet like seeds in the soil of real time, deep like the hollow of Earth's basin, lined with bones, ancient stones who carry water home, back to the source, bursting over bellies and full moon breasts, renewed in liquid memory, taking refuge in animate time, now time, inside me, you are there, somehow the weave of this thread, we bear the load, we care enough to carry, we carry together, so let us take refuge in knowing this is Sagitoin, Wagutoin, Pimatsuin. Easpi moya tepwe wenota, Mamoe Pimatsuin, Ochi. Easpi moya tepwe wenota, Mamoe Pimatsuin, Ochi.
That was quite an amazing performance. I remember being really moved when we were recording it in the gallery. We also heard this year from behind the scenes, we heard from curators, we heard from members of the public and artists. And so the next selection features some of these different voices that took part in the virtual museum. You'll notice that sometimes people are at home, sometimes people are at the museum. It depended on what restrictions we were living under at the time. So I hope you enjoy the next segment. It's quite a variety. See you at the end.
Hi, I'm Haley, and I'm an exhibitions manager at the Aga Khan Museum. Part of the role of the exhibitions team is to help transform an idea into a reality in the gallery. For our latest exhibition, Sanctuary, we were lucky to work with Azra Aksamia, the exhibition designer, and Michael Sheniel, the exhibition curator, to help bring this idea to life. In this session, I'm going to talk about 3 design interventions and some of the challenges and solutions the exhibitions team encountered in the process. The first challenge was for us to source thousands of secondhand t-shirts in order to build the architecture of the gallery that Azra designed. In order to build the loom walls that Azra designed, we needed to source at least 2,000 secondhand t-shirts in only 4 weeks. We started a t-shirt drive at the museum. We put a call out to the museum community and visitors to donate as many secondhand t-shirts as possible. In just 4 weeks, we had received over 1,000 t-shirts from our community. And while that was amazing, we still needed another 1,000 more. We were lucky enough to be put in touch with Rachel at Penny Arcade Vintage in Toronto. And through her vintage store, Rachel helped us source another 1,000 secondhand t-shirts. To put your mind at ease, we sent all of these to a professional laundry service in order to clean the shirts so they wouldn't pose a risk to visitors or the artworks on display. Next, the t-shirts went to Juiceworks, the exhibition fabricator based in Toronto. Juiceworks took all of these t-shirts, they stripped them, they sorted them by color, and they knotted them to create these strings that form the loom walls. Not only did JuiceWorks knot and string the t-shirts, they sorted them by color and created a color gradient based on the theme of each section in the exhibition. One of the key themes of Sanctuary is environmental sustainability, and with Azra's design and Michael's vision for the gallery, the exhibitions team worked to identify as many sustainable, recycled, and recyclable materials as possible to help reduce the carbon footprint of Sanctuary. Adhesive vinyl is frequently used in exhibitions to display text, graphics, and labels. For this exhibition, we wanted to reduce the amount of vinyl that we were using, and we worked with our supplier, Icon Visual, to source a recyclable form of adhesive vinyl. Another way that we reduced the environmental impact of the labels and graphics in Sanctuary was working with local artist Joel Cottrell, who hand-lettered all of the exhibition text on the wall. For some of the display prints in the gallery, we decided to use Falcon board, which is a recyclable alternative to foam core. For this 60-foot process drawing created by Azra Aksamiya and her team, we decided to use a recyclable fabric material for the printing. This HP light fabric seemed like the perfect choice for an artwork that is focused on the social and environmental impact of the textile industry. Thanks for joining me today, and thanks to our partners and suppliers for their work in bringing this exhibition to life.
Hello, I'm Olga Stefatou. I'm a Greek visual artist working mainly with photography and video. I'm in Athens now. I'm so happy that my work Chrysalis is exhibited at Aga Khan Museum along with the exhibition Sanctuary. I was supposed to come for the opening, but unfortunately the current life conditions we're all living in didn't allow it, but I hope in the future. My work is around freedom and gender inequality, and my approach is mainly documentary, but I like combining different kind of mediums. I'm also fascinated the last years with the idea of creating experiences through photography, and Chrysalis is a project like that. We will do some tests before. Working as a photojournalist for a couple of years, I cover widely the refugee crisis in Greece. I met refugees, I talked with them, I became friends with them, and I had a deep desire to create a personal project that would represent more my own values. This project I would like to be about the women, because the refugee women represent half of the refugee population in Greece, and they need our support. They need more support to integrate because of their cultural background. So I wanted a project for them, and I was looking for an idea. At some point, I saw again an older picture I've done, a self-portrait, where I used again the survival blanket. This material have become somehow a symbol of the refugee crisis, and when I saw that older picture, I said, why not creating a golden dress for a woman, for each woman, and take the photographs? So this is how everything started. For me, Chrysalis is not a fashion project, it's a documentary project, and it's important to have the photographs and the text together, the photographs and the stories together. I started the project in January 2018. I proposed immediately to Guram Tsotsanidze to create the costumes. Guram is a designer and artist living in Athens and coming from Georgia. I totally trust him, and I'm very grateful for this collaboration. Afterwards, I started looking for the space where to hold the sessions. I was looking for a space where the women will feel very comfortable, very safe. And a Syrian friend introduced me to Communitism. Communitism is a group of people, and they are managing a heritage building, a beautiful building. When I entered in the blue room, I thought that this is exactly what I'm looking for. The color, the light from the ceiling, the architecture, it was just ideal. And then I started looking to find the women who would like to participate in Chrysalis. I met the women through other refugees, I met them through people who work with the refugees, and also the women who have participated, they introduced me to other women. So yeah, it went somehow through the word of mouth. It wasn't easy. I had to earn their trust. It was very important because there are people who have suffered a lot. Some of them, they suffer from depression. Their husbands don't allow them easily to participate in this kind of projects. They're shy. There again, the cultural barriers. They don't feel comfortable going out of the house or the camp. So I was very patient to find the women. And I think that the ones who have participated so far, they were ready to stand out and speak out. For each woman, we tried with Guram to create a unique and personalized dress based on her life and her background. The photo sessions were a bonding experience. Each of them was challenging, difficult, easy, fun, surprising. There are so many unforgettable memories. I remember Roa when she brought that morning her golden shoes. She was very engaged, and I remember Raha when she sang for us. It was such a powerful moment. I remember the day I photographed Nanzanin. It was such a difficult day. Her husband was calling her every 5 minutes from Germany to stop the session. She decided to continue until the end. And I remember Mariam. That was a surprise. She wanted to be photographed naked because she wanted to talk about her body, that her body belongs only to her. So yes, it was a learning experience for me, and it was a very creative and enjoyable experience for all of us. I keep contact with most of the women. I want to know what is happening in their lives, and some of them are still in Athens, some have moved to different countries. I was very released when Ellie, the 60 years old woman, she sent me a message that she arrived in Germany and she's again with her children, and she met for first time her grandchildren. I hope the visitors will feel more empathy about the refugees. I believe they are going to see that refugees are strong individuals with hopes, with opinions, with fears, with dreams, with passions. They want to contribute to our societies. They want to create a new free life, and they need opportunities for this. I hope the visitors will feel inspired by the women's strength. They will appreciate those powerful humans, and they are going to be more supportive to their efforts.
Hello everyone. I welcome you all to today's Curator Conversation. My name is Filiz Çakır-Philip. Our topic is the so-called Wagner Garden Carpet from the Beryl Collection in Glasgow, Scotland. Back in 2016, I proposed this magnificent carpet as lawn for a special exhibition here at the Aga Khan Museum. Since February 10th this year, the carpet is finally on view and has so far received great attention from our visitors. The exhibition is scheduled to run until August 16th. However, as a consequence of COVID-19, our audience has not been able to access our museum since mid-March. This is all the more a reason to share this monumental garden carpet currently hosted at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto with you through this video. Named after a German collector who acquired the garden carpet in the early years of the 20th century, the Wagner garden carpet came into the possession of the Scottish shipping magnate Sir William Burrell in 1939. The carpet was displayed in the drawing room of his castle until 1944, when he gave his art collection, including the carpet, to the city of Glasgow. Because of the carpet's monumental size and the restrictions Beryl himself placed on it, it has only been out of storage and on public display 3 times in the past 20 years. The Wagner garden carpet has never been to Canada before, and here at the Aga Khan Museum, we are proud to present our visitors with such a unique opportunity. The design of the carpet is inspired by the classic plan of formal Iranian gardens, known as Chahar-Bagh or Four Gardens, a walled park with water channels. The Wagner garden carpet has a formal garden layout on a dark blue background. It is dominated by 2 long parallel water channels that are linked by a central pool and 2 short branch channels, all together forming a H shape. The carpet is best viewed from a bird's eye perspective. Its installation at the Aga Khan Museum therefore makes it easier to understand its ornamental system. The layout of the flora and fauna gradually changes direction in the top half of the carpet, creating a panoramic view of the garden for the person sitting on it at the bottom half, letting the plants and animals appear upright as they would appear in a real garden. This unusual immersive design element, along with the profusion of life, is woven into the carpet knot by knot. By the way, the Wagner garden carpet has about 100 knots per each square centimeter. The imagery of the Wagner carpet is a merry mixed garden and forest vegetation and an amazing variation of wildlife busy with life and activity. In the Iranian Paradise Garden, or Chahar-Bagh, the most important elements were water, sanctuary, and shade, which provided a refuge from daily trials of nomadic and semi-nomadic life. Its form, as rendered in Iranian carpet patterns, was based on the 4 rivers of life, which divided the garden into 4 quarters. In the Chahar-Bagh, the 4 water channels typically carry water into a central pool or fountain. They are being interpreted as the 4 rivers in paradise filled with milk, honey, wine, and water. This association may have helped the introduction of this garden concept into Islamic garden architecture and landscaping, which are intended for rest and meditation. They usually include particular places for sitting, as you can also find them in the Aga Khan Park surrounding the Aga Khan Museum. In the context of the Wagner garden carpet, it's interesting to point out a linguistic contribution by Iranian culture to the heritage of the world. The origin of the English word for paradise is namely rooted in the ancient Persian term for a walled garden. The Wagner garden carpet is a masterpiece of Islamic art. The origin of this monumental carpet takes us to Kerman, an important city in southeast Iran with ancient pre-Islamic roots and strong skills in carpet weaving. The carpet is dated to the 17th century and therefore one of the oldest surviving Iranian garden carpets of its kind. The Wagner garden carpet has an ingenious design and a bounty of birds, animals, and blossoms that steer the beholder into the center of a luxuriant garden. It is home to a vast variety of flowers and trees, including cypresses. I hope to see you all soon at the Aga Khan Museum.
Hi, my name is Michael Chagnon, and I'm a curator at the Aga Khan Museum. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a drawing in the museum's collection. It depicts a seated man concentrating on an object that he holds in his lap. Though the drawing doesn't contain any inscriptions that tell us where or when it was made, or the artist who made it, based on its style, it's likely that it was produced in Iran during the first half of the 17th century, a time when the country was ruled by the Safavid dynasty. This was a period when single independent pictures, such as this one, focusing on only one or two figures, were widely made by Persian artists. The drawing was later mounted with elegantly dyed and gilded margins for inclusion in a muraka, or album, which would have contained other pictures as well as specimens of calligraphy. When we look closely at the picture, we can see that the artist who made it was a master draftsman, carefully modulating the weight of his lines and varying the amount of detail over the picture surface to create a dynamic and highly textured ink composition, lightly enhanced with pale colors and spots of gold. In a close-up image, we can see more clearly what the subject, a seated man, is doing. He's hunched over, looking intently at the rectangular object that he holds in his lap, while his right hand is held in a way that suggests he's gripping something. Many seated figures like this are known from other pictures of the era, including an illustration in a manuscript known as Akhlaq-i-Nasiri, made in the last decade of the 16th century in Lahore, Pakistan, which was then a capital of the Mughal Empire. The illustration depicts a court atelier with a master artist overseeing multiple other artists. Among them are several seated figures who are practicing calligraphy or making landscape or animal drawings on pieces of paper, supported by firm tablets held in their laps. So it seems clear that the figure in our Persian drawing is a seated artist with a tablet in his lap, ready to practice his craft. Unlike his counterparts in the Mughal illustration, however, he doesn't work as part of a team or in a studio, but alone and outdoors. Moreover, his tablet doesn't show any image of what he's creating, though we might expect to see something here. Even more curiously, a critical tool of his trade, a pen or a brush, is missing, even though his hand is positioned as though it's gripping one. Now, it may be possible that the artist who created the drawing simply didn't get around to finishing it. But given how detailed and finely executed this work is, I'd like to consider whether there's maybe another explanation. Could it be possible that the picture was deliberately left unfinished? That the image on the tablet and the pen or brush were deliberately left absent? If so, why? One explanation can be found in texts about the art of picture making from around the time that this drawing was created. Some of these texts were composed as prefaces to murakas, the picture and calligraphy albums of the kind that this drawing was once included in. One such preface from a muraka made for an Iranian nobleman around the year 1564 or 65 contains a passage about the imaginative power of painters. Its author, Mir Said Ahmed, writes, quote, "It is no secret that the amazing images and wonderful motifs of the practitioners of this craft are well known in every region and are the object of contemplation for those possessed of insight. The imaginative power and elegance of nature that this group has, no one of the other arts possesses. The beauty that unveils its base in the tablet of the painter's mind is not reflected in everyone's imagination." About 10 years later, the year 1576-77, Shamsuddin Muhammad Wasifi, the author of another album's preface, repeats essentially the same thing. Quote, "Truly the beautiful fairy and gorgeous houri manifested on the tablet of the painter's mind and the page of the designer's imagination are not reflected in anyone else's mind." Interestingly, both writers conceive of the artist's imagination as a tablet where the visualization of images occurs at a level of power and beauty that only their kind possesses. The near repetition of this concept in the two prefaces and in similar texts of the era tells us just how widespread it was during the 16th and 17th centuries in Iran. Album preface authors of the period discuss painting from another angle, too, specifically describing divine creation as a miraculous form of painting. For example, a late 15th or early 16th century album preface attributed to the historian Khandemir opens with the following poetic verse, quote, "When the painter of eternity, meaning God, portrayed the sun, he adorned an album with leaves of the celestial sphere. Therein he depicted, without color or brush, many bright-cheeked beauties." What I'd like to suggest then is that our drawing is a visualization of notions of artistry that were current during the Safavid period and encapsulated in texts about painting like those I just quoted. The anonymous artist of our drawing didn't just leave his work unfinished in a casual sense. Rather, the absence of an image on the seated man's tablet, as well as a pen or a brush to execute such an image, may have been deliberate. What we see here is a seated artist deeply engrossed in concentration. But he isn't producing an image, he's thinking about the images that exist in his mind, conceptualized in this period as a tablet. This notion is given concrete, emblematic form by the empty tablet that he holds in his lap. It may even be an invitation to use our own imaginations to supply the missing image. As for his missing pen or brush, this also seems to be related to ideas about artistic creativity that were in circulation. Its very absence from the picture may be a visual hyperbole, aggrandizing the painter's imaginative capacities by likening them to the creative power of God, who executed the, so to speak, picture of the world, quote, without color or brush.
Hello, my name is Bita Purvash, Assistant Curator at the Aga Khan Museum. Welcome to our Curator Conversation on two beautiful 17th century tiles from our collection and how our colleagues from Royal Ontario Museum delved into the history of these tiles and helped us solve this puzzle. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the scholars who performed this amazing research, and both are my dear professors. Dr. Lisa Golombek, a Curator Emeritus at the Royal Ontario Museum, who also is a professor at the University of Toronto and a scholar on Islamic art with the focus on the art of Iran. And Dr. Robert Mason, who is an archaeologist scientist at the Royal Ontario Museum, also a professor at the University of Toronto, and an expert in the scientific analysis of ceramics. Thank you very much for joining us today. So Dr. Golombek, I want to ask you, please let us know how this project got started.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us. We're always happy to talk about this project. It was actually these two tiles that started me, or let's say restarted me on the project. A couple of years ago, the Aga Khan Museum asked me if I would write something up for their website about several objects, and these tiles were among them. So I was happy to do that, and I started looking at them, and I noticed that one of them was missing a corner. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Had a look at it, and I saw that, in fact, that was part of the tile, that it was supposed to be missing that corner. And then I realized this must be part of one of the great tile arches that some years ago I started studying, but I let it lapse because I got onto other things. Our museum had actually bought two rather complete and one partially complete example of these great tile arches. Two of ours are mounted in the Islamic Gallery in the Royal Ontario Museum. At any rate, I thought, well, I wonder what large panel these two tiles came from. There must be, almost 60 others that belong to it. And so I started looking, and then I realized this would be an interesting project. let's just gather up all the information we can find about these tile arches. I knew that there were some in Stuttgart and Berlin and Hamburg and other places. And then I realized this was going to be too much for me to handle. So I went to my colleague of my two past projects, Dr. Mason, is to see if he would contribute his talents and skills and his great eye to working on this project. And so we got started again a couple of years ago, gathering all this material and looking on the web, which now was a new resource that we could use to find what I call orphan tiles. So that's how we got started. And thanks to the Aga Khan Museum, or this would have lain dormant.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. And Dr. Mason, what was your experience when you started working on these tiles?
Well, my first reaction when Lisa turned up in my office that day was that I was hoping she wasn't going to ask me to do another study on blue and white pottery. But the tiles are far more interesting. They are unique objects, not quite unique, because usually there's two of them, rather than mass-produced things. They are really works of art themselves. And it's the narratives within them that particularly interests me, that there are stories involved in almost every tile. And some of the stories we haven't worked out what they are yet, but there's a story behind every one.
This is very inspiring. So now would you please walk us through the steps that was taken in researching these tiles?
These two tiles in the collection of the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto were probably made in Isfahan, Iran, in about 1685. They depict a clump of irises. The bottom right corner of the bottom tile is missing. It shows the same marks of grinding as the sides, as a part of the preparation of the tile to go into its frieze. The treatment is bold, suitable to architectural decoration, not designed to stand alone on a museum wall. Originally, it would have been part of an entire frieze of tiles over an archway, like this one in the Royal Ontario Museum. One thing you can see right away is that one side mirrors precisely the other. This and other friezes were acquired by then ROM Curator of Islamic Art Lisa Golombek in 1976. Over the years she has done some research on these tiles, but it was not until recently, when she was asked by the Aga Khan Museum to look into their iris tiles, that she approached colleague and co-author Robert Mason, an archaeologist and scientist accustomed to piecing together the past, to work together on the tile project. The team has attempted to recreate all of this group of tile friezes by looking at museum collections and sales catalogues from around the world, sometimes working with existing friezes, other times by piecing together separate fragments. These are in the ROM and are placed on a framework based on the complete tile friezes. We had no idea at first that these monkeys on the left were related to the men on the right. However, since we know one side is the mirror of the other, we can flip tiles over from one side to fit them on the other. The man in yellow on the right is actually from the opposite side of the frieze from the tile beneath it. We also know that there are always two versions of the frieze, in this case one with a green background and one with a blue background, but with almost precisely the same design. As we slowly piece the image together, the monkeys and men connect, creating a narrative that will require further investigation. This work continues, for here in this recent sales catalogue you can see that this tile is a counterpart of this tile, but from the opposite side of the frieze and from the other version of the frieze. So far we have found a little less than 30 separate tile frieze designs of the same distinct style, and of each of these only 2 examples of each design are known, suggesting a building of about 60 archways, of which the overwhelming majority are exactly the same size. An example of how they were used can be found in the Hasht Behesht Palace in Isfahan, built in 1669. The tiles are made in a similar way, but a distinctly different style from the tiles we're looking at. We think the building is now lost, but was in Iran, at Isfahan. And near the Maidan, the great public space of Isfahan. This contemporary drawing on the right and this reconstruction on the left shows the area of the Maidan as it looked in the late 17th century. And this building, the Palace of the Stables, would be about the right size and type, with long arcades around the perimeter. It was demolished shortly before these tiles first appeared on the art market. Apart from trying to understand how these tiles were used, we are investigating how they were made, including handheld X-ray fluorescence analysis to determine chemistry. This image is taken with a digital microscope to show the structure of one of these tiles. The sequence of production begins with a plain, square, earthenware tile about 22 centimeters across. This is then covered with a white glaze. The design is outlined with a black paint which probably contained wax. This is the so-called cuerda seca technique, which can be translated from the Spanish as dry cord, presumably because it appears dry in comparison to the wet glazed parts. Then other coloured glazes are painted over the white glaze and are kept separate by the waxy line until they dry, and the tile is then fired. Another way of looking at this is to recreate the sequence with a simplified version of this bearded man. We start with a plain white glazed tile. The basic design is put on the tile using a pattern that enables the design to be copied to both sides of the same frieze and both copies of the same design. The areas between the black lines were then filled with colour. It is at this stage that the tile would have received its main firing. Afterwards, a talented artist, perhaps the original designer themselves, would have added finer details using the same black dry pigment. This would then have been fired again, probably at a lower temperature, to fuse this last black paint to the tile. The Aga Khan Museum tiles would have been made in this manner. To start to understand where these tiles literally fit, they have been placed on the framework based on the complete tile phrases. The angle of the cut at the bottom indicates that it is from this position on the frieze. We then set about looking for related tiles. This was our first connection. From an old sales catalogue, we found this. The red line around it shows that these are flipped over from the other side of the frieze to fit our framework. Then we found a more recent sales catalogue with this piece from the same side. Since this is clearly a frieze of peacocks, we tried this one, and it also fits. Then Lisa Golombek found the original sales catalogue from a Kevorkian sale at New York in 1927, and you can see it is our complete peacock and iris frieze, both sides. So we now have a good idea of the entire frieze. We think this is the actual frieze published by Kevorkian in 1927, and how it was broken up and separated, we don't know. With the gracious help of museum staff, dealers, and other colleagues around the world, the team will continue hunting for lost tiles and piecing together the lost narratives they represent.
This is truly fascinating, and seeing these tiles in context really helps us to see the entire imagery of the tiles and to better understand how the people of the time really perceive these tiles. But one question remains here. What's the next step, or what is the next puzzle to solve here, how we can move forward? And I would like to ask Dr. Mason to let us know.
Well, from my perspective, there are two things. One is to continue with the technical analysis. I'd like to do scanning electron microscopy on some fragments to determine the chemistry of the glazes more precisely than we did with a handheld XRF. But also, we still need to carry on looking for tiles. There are some tile friezes represented by a single tile that we know can't fit anywhere else. And so the whole rest of that frieze is out there somewhere. And we know there are things missing. For instance, we have, as Lisa said, there's an almost complete frieze of a group of men with horses. And we have almost an entire frieze, and we have fragments of the second frieze, because there's usually two completely different friezes. But each one is missing this beautiful 4-tile portrait of a horse. So somewhere out there on the wall of some stately home or something like that are those 4 tiles times 4, because there are 4 of those horses out there, and we don't know what they are. And that's just some of the things which should be out there. And we just need to beat the bushes some more. Perhaps this video will bring some people forward and say, oh, I have one of those tiles, which would be absolutely wonderful. I think that's where I would like us to go to next.
That will be certainly wonderful. Thank you. And Dr. Golombek, how about from your perspective?
Well, of course, I am equally intent on rounding up the full lot, the full lot of these arches. As Dr. Mason said, each one of these arches has a twin out there, because we hypothesize that each set of stories ran along an arcade, along a probably a garden courtyard, and its twin or its parallel ran along the other side. So, and they aren't all identical in terms of coloration, but they are in terms of the use of the same cartoon. At any rate, that's a lot of tiles to round up. So we'd like to get the full set. And then we, excuse me, 2 main questions that I have. One is, what building did they really come from? Now, we have suggested one of the palaces of Isfahan from the 17th century, from a refurbishing later in the century. But, you know, maybe there is another one that's possible. So that's one very, very interesting question. The other one is, what is the sum of all these stories? What do they mean? Why were they selected to be put together? I mean, we have some are taken from famous works of Persian literature like Shahnameh and Nizami, Jami. Others are taken from local scenes of the city, from Isfahan, of entertainments and games or religious ceremonies. So we don't really know what this all means, and this would be certainly something that maybe other colleagues and scholars can contribute once they know what the full repertory is. So there's a long distance to go on this.
And I think that's one of the beauty of the research. There's always a lot that we discover, and then there's a lot to continue work on. So this is amazing. So thank you very much. Thank you to both of you, and also thank you to our visitors to join us today. And please visit our online collection to find some further information about these styles. Thank you very much again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Different people experiences life differently, and the journeys that they endure also are different in many ways, depending on the circumstances. In 1929, my dad left India at a very young age and went by boat across the Indian Ocean to the coastal town of East Africa, from where he had ultimately made his destination to settle into Uganda. In 1972, he experienced a different journey, and a journey that was completely unexpected, one that was forced upon him and likewise many other hundreds and thousands of people who had to leave Uganda as refugees and make their final destination. Well, in my dad's case, that happened to be Canada. My own experiences was a little different. And at a very young age in 1971, I went to the United Kingdom to pursue my education. And in 1978, I decided to join my family in Canada, where we made our permanent home. And when I came across this beautiful art object at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, it is the 19th century chestnut leaf from Ottoman Turkey. It depicts a beautiful inscription shaped in a boat, signifying a journey. Now, this particular journey is that of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and it is referred to in the Quran as the Suratul Isra, the night journey of the Prophet. Many people have traveled far and wide and made their different journeys either through their own choice or frequently through forceful situations due to wars, due to political upheaval, whatever the circumstances, and they end up in Canada. So life is such that the journeys begin and end, but we don't know what the final destination is going to be. It is interesting to see and how you can relate one's journey differently on different times is an interesting one, and to understand what the final destination is going to be is also a question mark for many.
Well, that's all we had time for today. But if you want to find out more, go to agakhanmuseum.org and check out the Museum Without Walls. You'll find a lot of other content, longer conversations, shorter conversations, puzzles. There's a lot to choose from. So if you haven't already checked it out, please visit us at agakhanmuseum.org. We end today's episode with another performance from the Lapis Benefit, Maneli Jamal, who is a favorite at the museum. I hope you enjoy. See you next time.
This song that I'm going to play for you here is a special song for me. It was written in memory of my childhood in Germany. And growing up in the Western world my whole life, I know how important it is to have your cultural background there as well, musically speaking, of course. And when I was a little boy, I remember my dad was in the room to the right of me, and my mom was in the room to the left of me. And my punishment growing up was always to draw and to paint, because both of my parents are musicians and artists. As I was there, forced to paint and draw as my punishment, my dad was playing Persian violin. Really nostalgic, really sort of haunting Persian melodies that stuck with me ever since. And to the room to the left of me was my mom listening to Western classical music like Tchaikovsky, Bach, Beethoven, all the greats. So in my left ear, there was this Western influence, and in my right ear was this Middle Eastern influence. And I think later on in my life, when I eventually moved to Canada, I realized how important these cultural differences were. I try to cultivate that with this piece here called Zaire.